What is up, Ravens flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin. And we got some news here in Ravens land, Ravens flock, to talk about that we're really, well, I don't know if we're interested or not, but certainly intrigued by the news. And we're looking forward to talking to you guys about it. But before we do, take a second, hit the subscribe button, give us a like, turn your notifications, and make sure you stay up to date with all your Ravens news. But Glenn, what's going on out there in Twitterverse? Because this only exists because Twitter exists.
Absolutely. I love it. And I appreciate the content that Twitter continues to provide to this show. But recently, Ravens News Daily proposed a question on Twitter. I believe it was Twitter. It was either Twitter or Instagram, talking about should the Ravens bring back former first round pick Hayden Hurst, the tight end, in free agency after he was traded, of course, to the Atlanta Falcons in return for a second round pick, which later ended up being turned into J.K. Dobbins because he wanted to be more of a primary focus, and he understood that Mark Andrews was going to be that at the tight end position here in Baltimore. So he asked if he could move on, and really the Ravens did him a favor in that they sent him to a very tight end friendly offense with an accomplished quarterback in it, Matt Ryan over in Atlanta. But it just so happened that the following year they went out and drafted Kyle Pitts, who is like a generational tight end. And of course, Hayden Hurst found himself back in a familiar position as the number 2 behind a stud tight end like he was here in Baltimore. So he is not going to be returning to Atlanta. And he liked Hayden Hurst himself liked the idea on Twitter. He hit the like button, or it's either Twitter or Instagram. I can't really tell the difference.
One of those social media places.
Yeah, I'm not very well versed in this, but he did like the post, suggesting that at the very least, he's open to a reunion. So, Jimbo, my first question is, why is it that Hayden Hurst is now okay with being the number 2 behind Mark Andrews when he was here initially?
Yeah, I think there's a few reasons for that. One, being the idea that the grass isn't always green on the other side. Our buddy LaRon McClain talked about how he would have stayed in Baltimore and let him pay him anything to stay here. So going to a team that maybe isn't of the same echelon as the Baltimore Ravens can put things in perspective for you. Yeah. Also, sometimes reality is what the scoreboard is. And so Hayden Hurst has produced like a number 2, and therefore he is a number 2. And maybe he's just come to grips with that. Like, he's an older guy. I think if I'm not mistaken, we drafted him. He's already 25 years old.
Yep.
He's made plenty of money as a first rounder. Not that he's not that he's looking to stop making money anytime soon. Of course, he wants to make money, but I think he wants to go to a place where he can be productive, where he knows he fits in. He knows the system. And I think the Ravens would now be in a situation where they would utilize him a little more.
Yep.
Than before, because look, as much as people don't want to admit it, it hurt the Ravens in a lot of respects when Hayden left.
Yep.
Missing that athleticism, especially when Boyle had his issues, and I mean that tight end group got thin. And so I think that he's okay with it now because sometimes the reality is what it is, and I think money or status or title is not happiness.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. And if you're Hayden, you also look back and say, well, yeah, I mean, when he left here, he did get more targets, had more catches, more yards, more touchdowns in his first year in Atlanta. But as a number 2 in Atlanta, still a tight end friendly, still an offense that uses 2 tight ends because Arthur Smith came from Tennessee and took over as the head coach in Atlanta. And Arthur ran a ton of 2 tight end sets when he was in Tennessee with Jonnu Smith and And oh man, I'm blanking on the other guy's name who's still there. It's gonna kill me. But in a tight end friendly offense, as the number 2, he had less targets, less catches, and less yards in Atlanta than he did in that same position here in Baltimore. So I think the real question is there a spot out there in the league where Hayden can compete to be the number 1 tight end? Because that is not going to be the case, if he comes to Baltimore. That job is clearly and firmly in the hands of Mark Andrews, and rightfully so. So if he's okay with now being that clear-cut second fiddle, can you think of another team where if you're the number 2 tight end, you get more opportunity than you do here in Baltimore? Like, if you're okay being number 2, there's no better place to be number 2 than Baltimore, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Based on Greg Roman's ability to have multiple and his interest and his habit of having a multitude of tight ends on the field at once, like like you kind of mentioned, and then also the system opening that number 2 guy up, and then you add on the fact that you have a guy in Mark Andrews that's going to attract so much attention that you're going to have matchups that are to your liking day in and day out, snap in and snap out. And so I think that this could potentially turn into a win-win if the money's right.
Yeah.
Because the Ravens know more about Hayden Hurst than any other team in the NFL.
100%.
Even more than the Atlanta Falcons, who was like a rental, right? Like he went there on vacation. But I think
he did spend equal time in both places.
Man, it does not feel that way. He was here, 3 years?
Not just 2 in each.
Just 2.
Yeah.
Goodness, great. You're right. I guess because this was his free agency year because they didn't pick up the 5th year option. So he just finished his 4th year. Fair enough. But point being.
But they definitely did a lot of their draft deal. I mean, they took him in the first round.
All of that matters, right?
Yeah.
And so, and he be familiar with the system, all the above. But I think that this could be a win-win here. I actually feel, like I said, pretty positive about it. How do you feel about the potential remarriage of the Baltimore Ravens and Hayden Hurst?
I mean, I think you said it best when you said they missed him. They missed him in a big way. He was a massive matchup issue because you can't just ignore what Mark Andrews is doing. And so you have to naturally put a lesser talent on Hayden Hurst. You have to try and hope that you can't let Mark Andrews beat you. So you got to make someone else beat you. And the problem was when Hayden was here, he could do that because the guy was just an athletic freak. So
fast, so strong.
Fast. Yeah. And
good hands.
And mature. I mean, because like you mentioned, he was an older guy who was already a pro at baseball before switching back to football. So he was already much more of an adult than a typical rookie would be. And he was a mismatch nightmare. I mean, you put a linebacker on him. Good luck keeping up with him. He hit the top speed of any Raven in 2019 when the Ravens had their most historic regular season in history. No one ran a faster speed than Hayden Hurst did on that long touchdown, 61-yard touchdown grab. So he's a mismatch. And then you put a safety on him, a corner on him. Please. The guy is still 6'4", 260 pounds.
Yeah. Can you imagine him on the mound?
Oh,
like that, I'd be terrified. With the hair coming out of the back of his head, especially if he had the beard too. No, thank you.
If he didn't get the yips, he probably could have done some damage, but he definitely did get the yips when he was a baseball player. But I think this would be an obvious choice to have this reunion. Now the question is, what's he want to get paid?
Yeah.
And are the Ravens, typically when the Ravens trade a guy away, they don't always welcome him back because they're disappointed in the first place that he wanted out instead of being happy where he was.
And I think the other thing to consider when you're talking about the money, it's not, everyone initially goes to Mark Andrews' money, but then you got Nick Boyle, who's not getting paid a little bit.
Right.
Nick Boyle's getting some good money as well. So what is their willingness to then further invest in the tight end position? And I'll give you a word, Glenn. It comes down to this, and Eric DeCosta loves this word. It's about value to the Ravens. Yeah. And the accurate depiction of that they can at least have with a guy like Hayden Hurst, right? They know it's not a simulation. They know what it's like to have Hayden here and where he can make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, depending on what the money is, the value is easy to determine. If that value is high enough, I think a deal gets done.
Yeah. And just so everyone knows, there is no there's no chance that they move on from Nick Boyle because
Yeah.
they would save $0 against the cap and they would incur a $7 million dead
Yeah.
cap
No.
penalty. So you can't say, well, I'd rather have Hurst than Boyle because, you love the offensive ability that he has stretching the field. Well, that's not an opportunity because they wouldn't gain anything out of releasing him, not a cent in cap space, and incur $7 million in dead money. So they would have to be fine with, like you said, investing even more money than the massive amount they're already investing in Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. And you have to reason with that in your own head and go, it's worth it. And that's the question. Is it worth it?
And what happens with Pat Ricard, right? That's another piece that comes into play, because at the end of the day, is it worth it to the Ravens? Is it, like you said, it's a question I'll have to answer, but it's going to be different for every team. For a lot of teams, they might say no, but for us, knowing the group of tight ends that have been together in the past and what they've been able to do and how they complement one another, it would be great to have him back, in my opinion.
Awesome.
I would love to have him back.
What if something were to happen, knock on wood, to Mark Andrews?
Right.
We don't have anyone even close to him.
Right.
Now, again, he's not Mark Andrews, but athletically, he's much closer to Mark Andrews than anyone else we got on
Nick
this team.
Boyle is just a dancing bear, right?
Like, he's just a caveman who just smashes people.
Yeah,
but he's not a guy who can scare you up the seam. He's not a guy that can terrify you vertically. But Hayden Hurst certainly is that guy. And then you just talk about what he does in a blocking standpoint. This guy can block at every level. He's 260 pounds, so he can take on a linebacker because he weighs more than that guy. But what's fantastic about him is that he can then also get to the third level and block safeties and corners down the field, which, as much as we love Nick Boyle, his long speed is certainly not something that's big for his. It's not something you compliment when you talk about Nick Boyle. So while we love his athleticism and his blocking ability, he's limited in what he can do at the third level.
Pre-knee surgeries, slowest 40 coming out of the combine of any tight end.
So there you go. I mean, the guy is
That's
what
the
he
stone
is.
Drill.
Hey, the guy's quick in short space.
That's right. That's what I'm saying. He's going to have a resurrection of his career once he moves to tackle.
That's it.
You know what I mean? So, but let us know what your guys' thoughts are. Any interest in bringing back Hayden Hurst? It sounds like he has some interest. Should the Ravens have interest in a reunion? Leave all your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll talk to you guys soon.